Look, our kid is so adorable. Looks just like me, huh? We've got another one on the way too. Look at my wife. You can tell she's expecting, right? But man, it must be miserable being barren and useless, huh? Breaking up with a dud like you was the best decision I ever made.
With a voice loud enough to echo through the mall, my ex-husband Scott belittled me with words like defective, barren, useless, boasting about his fertile, superior new wife. Although I received sympathetic glances from those around us, at that moment I couldn't care less. With a sigh, I started to share a major fact he was unaware of. Don't you know? My name is Alyssa. I'm a 34-year-old housewife. Scott, my ex-husband, is a 36-year-old office worker, 2 years older than me. I met Scott at a social gathering through mutual friends. Scott is very outgoing, the complete opposite of me. Scott was the one who reached out to me, who was being shy at the gathering. At first, I could only have awkward conversations and I was always in the corner. But thanks to Scott's outgoing personality, I was easily welcomed into the group.
You should have more confidence in yourself, Alyssa. It's a waste. You're so cute,
he would say, casually walking beside me on our way home from drinking parties. I started to have a soft spot for Scott, who was upfront but somehow adorable. Afterwards, we started to see each other more. Our relationship progressed, and we ended up living together and getting married. Loved by my kind husband, our married life was smooth sailing. But even though we were a close couple, we were not able to have children. Therefore, we, who both wanted a child, decided to undergo fertility treatment. Or rather, I decided to undergo fertility treatment. Scott was really kind. He was supportive throughout my fertility treatment.
It's okay, I'm here. Even if we can't have children, I'll always be by your side, Alyssa.
Scott, I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, Alyssa. You don't have to bear it all by yourself. Let's take our time.
At this point, I didn't even think, why just me? And was simply filled with guilt. 3 years had passed since we started the fertility treatment, but there was no sign of us having children. Initially, kind Scott started subtly showing his irritation about not having children. One day, when I told Scott about my cycle and tried to initiate having sex, he said, "I'm tired," and turned his back to me and fell asleep. Since then, he has been making excuses and turning me away. Without even trying, we could not even confirm whether we could get pregnant. And we were facing a crisis in our relationship even before I could get pregnant. Our conversations as a couple also gradually decreased. But Scott started a conversation with me in a cheerful tone for the first time in a long time.
I saw my colleague's child the other day, and he was so cute.
Whether he knew my feelings or not, he started talking about his colleague's child. Oh, really?
I wonder when I can see my own child.
Scott would make sarcastic remarks and blame me like a mother-in-law. Yeah, but recently we haven't been doing anything, so I don't think I have any better chance of conceiving. While feeling guilty, I hesitantly talked back to Scott, but he quickly retorted,
"What? I'm just tired from work. If it was another woman, it would have been done without being forced, haha. Don't you think you failed as a woman if you can't have children? Try putting yourself in my shoes."
I could only stay silent. My heart started to break little by little, and I became afraid to even talk to Scott. A week later, I finished the examination and treatment at the hospital as usual and went home. I decided that this was the last, and when Scott came home, I spoke to him. "Can I talk to you for a moment?"
"What's up?"
The doctor at the hospital said it would be good if you also got checked. So would you like to go together?
What? You think there's a problem with me? There's no way.
But I heard that there aren't many husbands who never get tested. So can you do it? Even when I muster up my courage and ask again.
Are you kidding me? I've been dealing with you who lacks charm as a woman. What more cooperation do you need? Trying to blame me because you can't have children. You're the worst. I just want my own child. It doesn't have to be with you. Do you get it?
Scott criticized me as if saying that I, who cannot have a child, am useless. As a wife? As a woman, I was deemed as a failure. I was at a loss for words from the shock. Housework, fertility treatment, it was not all for me. I had sacrificed a lot for the sake of my existing family and the family of the future, but when he told me that I lack charm as a woman, my patience, which I had somehow kept up, finally reached its limit. A few days later, Scott casually revealed that he was actually cheating on me.
The other girl is pregnant, and to be honest, there's nothing happening with you, so I'll go with her.
Moreover, it seems that his mistress was a college student and she was pregnant.
Any man would choose to be with a partner that can bear his child.
Without any shame and rather speaking down to me, it was frankly infuriating, but thinking back to those words, it felt like he was declaring his affair, and somehow it made sense. So I easily signed the divorce papers that Scott had filled out on the table and submitted it to the city hall the next day. The divorce was due to infidelity, so I could have claimed damages, but I was still not satisfied with the child issue. I consulted with a lawyer and arranged not to claim damages in exchange for Scott undergoing a fertility test, and decided on getting back at him. A few days later, I reported my decision to my parents at home. Far from being upset, I was more angry and regretted not breaking up with Scott sooner. My time with him was a waste, and my friends encouraged me to make a fresh start. 2 years after the divorce, I ran into my ex-husband, Scott, while shopping at a mall. Scott was with his new wife, a former college student, and their child. Our homes weren't too far apart, and since we live in the countryside, it was expected that we might bump into each other at the mall.
Oh, long time no see. You still doing all right?
Hi. Scott greeted me with a smirk and a condescending attitude, unbecoming of a man who had run off on his wife.
Look, our kid is so adorable. Looks just like me, huh? We've got another one on the way too. Look at my wife. You can tell she's expecting, right? But man, it must be miserable being barren and useless, huh? Breaking up with a dud like you was the best decision I ever made.
Scott proudly bragged about his fertile wife and loudly insulted me, calling me defective, childless, and a failure. His voice echoed throughout the mall. Despite the sympathetic looks from those around us, I didn't care. As I let out a sigh, I began to reveal a critical fact to my ex-husband, as a form of revenge. Well, it's nice that you remarried a wonderful woman and even have a child. Your wife may be competent, but what about you, sir?
What? What are you talking about?
Don't you remember? You took a fertility test in place of damages? The test results came back. And Scott, it turns out you should have been the one getting fertility treatment. I was just fine and fertile.
That's a lie, right? It's some kind of joke, isn't it?
Scott, who had always thought he was fertile, was clearly disturbed. It's true. As I told him this, I calmly whispered into his flustered ear. If you think it's a lie, why don't you do a DNA test on your child? Best of luck building a happy family. Scott, panicking, hurriedly left me and confronted his wife. From a distance, I heard him yelling,
"You deceived me!"
and such, but I didn't want to cause more of a scene, so I waved my hand and left the place. My heart, which had been clouded for a while after the divorce, felt instantly clear. According to what I heard later, it seemed that the child his wife had given birth to, and the one she was currently pregnant with, were not Scott's. His wife had a main partner, and both children were from that man. However, desiring financial stability, she had chosen to marry Scott without love. Once it was discovered that the children weren't his, Scott was furious and their marriage deteriorated. The wife, who had never loved Scott, effortlessly switched over to the real father of her children. Scott, who was quickly discarded and became lonely, called me almost every day, saying things like,
"You're the only one I love. I was just dazzled by a younger woman, but I'm sober now,"
and requested to remarry me. The fact that he had abandoned me when I needed him most was an undeniable truth. There's no way such words could easily overturn that. I was dumbfounded and blocked his number on my phone. As for me, I had already remarried to a new husband and was blessed with our first child, living a smooth sailing married life at the time of the incident at the mall. I had known my new husband from the time before we were married, as he was from a client company I had been serving at my previous job. We first met in person at a dinner party, but I had been talking to him over the phone a lot for work, so it didn't feel like we were meeting for the first time. Although we had kept in touch, he didn't contact me after I decided to leave my job, and we gradually lost touch. One day, I ran into him in town after several years. He confessed that he had feelings for me when he heard that I was getting married, but didn't say anything. Over time, as we began to meet, I found myself attracted to him, and it didn't take long for us to get married. He accepted everything about me, even all the events that had happened during my previous marriage, saying,
"You can tell me everything. It's okay."
And before we got married, he even came to the hospital with me to take a fertility test. I felt an unprecedented amount of love from him for doing this to make me feel comfortable. I'm truly happy to have been blessed with my first child in life, with a husband who cares for me so much. A few years later, Scott, who had lost contact with me and was still unable to give up, started to hang around my area. Just as I was about to take our child, who had just started walking out to the park, I spotted Scott.
"No way."
He was dumbfounded at the sight of our child. Despite all the times I had told him, Scott, refusing to accept his infertility, was still under the impression that I was the infertile one. Starting from the next day, whenever he saw us, he began to argue that
"We were not infertile after all. That child is ours, born before we divorced."
Of course, there's no way that could be true. Considering the child's age, he is undoubtedly the child I had with my new husband. Until now, I had been ignoring Scott, as we didn't have any direct contact, but since he started confronting us, I was honestly at a loss about what to do. My husband then said,
"This child is ours, genuinely. I had a DNA test done because you kept stalking us. Here's the proof, so please stay away from our house."
And he held out the results to Scott, driving him away. I felt guilty for causing trouble to my family because Scott had nothing to do with my current family. But after driving Scott away, my husband silently held me and our child tight. There were no words, but that alone was enough. Once our child started attending daycare, perhaps because Scott couldn't get near our house, he started lurking around the daycare when my husband wasn't around. I was alert, but with the help of the Parents Association and the daycare, we managed to get through it for a while. However, when Scott finally forced his way into the daycare, We immediately reported him, as this act endangered the children, and Scott was taken into police custody. The responding police restrained Scott with practiced ease, but he kept on shouting his unfounded lie.
"That's my child! What's wrong with visiting my own child? Let me go!"
Causing confusion around him. Unfortunately, Scott's boss also had a child attending the same daycare as mine, so naturally, this incident became known to him. Since then, Scott was completely ignored at work. He was given no work and just idly spent his days. Despite this, in an attempt to remain at the company, he kept making desperate, unseemly excuses, shouting,
"There's no way I'm infertile! I do have my own child!"
Hearing this, it seems he was eventually let go, as anyone would expect. Scott, who had no workplace to go to and no family to return to, went back to his parents' house and lived quietly. However, the neighbors began to spread rumors about the man-child with no children, and it became widely known that he had been involved in a police matter, and he was looked down upon. Without a job and unable to have children, finding a new bride surely wouldn't be easy. The label of being childless was like a boomerang, coming back to deeply pure Scott, leaving a large scar. His parents seemed to keep him confined in their home, perhaps out of concern for the neighbors. There was no longer any possibility of him having a child. As for our family, we breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Scott was confined at home. Since then, we've been living blissfully, surrounded by my loving husband and child. Children keep parents together, and I firmly believe that no matter what happens to us, our child will keep us connected.